Namaskar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. I am Shubhendu Parth, editor of Voice and Data, and your host for today's webinar. This webinar is hosted by Voice and Data, which is India's oldest telecom magazine and is part of the CyberMedia group. This is the second part of the three-series interactive webinar that we are organizing to celebrate 25 years of mobile telephony in India. As you are aware, telecommunication and mobile internet have emerged as the lifeline and backbone of digital India, uh, playing a pivotal role in enabling the country to continue working during the current pandemic. Experts have also pointed out that remote working environment, which got a major push during the crisis, is the new normal, and it has started to change how businesses are done and the society operates. For the sake of the convenience, we have divided the deliberations into two parts. The first part will focus on how the sector has evolved, what has been achieved so far, and the challenges. In the second part of the panel discussion, the experts will deliberate on emerging 5G technologies, how it will drive social and economic transformation in the country, including making India Atmanirbhar. But before we kick off the session, I have some housekeeping essentials to announce. Ladies and gentlemen, during the duration of the webinar, the participants will be on listen-only mode. However, participants will be able to send questions through the chat window of their respective platforms, and we will take it up depending upon the available time. Friends, your feedback is also very important for us, and hence, may I request you all to submit your feedback at the end of the webinar. Uh, to kick off the webinar, I would like to now welcome our esteemed guests for the day. We have amongst us Mr. Ravinder Takkar, Managing Director and CEO of Vodafone India. Mr. Takkar is traveling and abroad. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us despite the time difference. I also take the opportunity to welcome Mr. TV Ramachandran, President of Broadband India Forum. Namaskar, sir. We also have among us Mr. Ajit Ranade, President and Chief Economist, Aditya Birla Group. Welcome, Mr. Ranade. Please also welcome Mr. Gaurav Basra, Chief Strategy Officer of Sterlite Technologies, and Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Chairman, CyberMedia Group. I'm extremely sorry to inform you all that Mr. Anshu Prakash, Chairman DCC and Secretary DOT, will not be able to join us today as he has been asked to attend a sudden urgent meeting. We regret his absence. And with this, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Pradeep Gupta and request him to take the discussion forward. Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much, Shubhendu. And I think, you very rightly said that, the pandemic has completely transformed the way we are looking at mobility. Last year, Voice and Data celebrated its 25 years, and this year we are celebrating 25 years of internet, of mobility in this country. These 25 years have seen tremendous amount of changes, which I'm sure the speakers who are here with me will talk about that. May I first request Mr. Ravinder Takkar to give some opening remarks, please.
Good afternoon, friends. I am pleased to be talking to you virtually at the VND TLF Dialogue. It is great to see one of the oldest and the most respected telecom and ICT media, Voice and Data, celebrate 25 years of mobile telephony in India. It is indeed a moment of pride for all of us who have made a significant contribution to the growth of telecom sector in India. I feel fortunate to be part of an industry that connects and empowers all. Telecom provides the critical connectivity layer to enable almost all the technologies that power tomorrow and make life so much better. It has brought about socio-economic development of enormous proportions and taken India to be amongst the top 5 economies of the world. Today, telecom has become the lifeline of India. It has bridged the digital divide between urban and rural, connecting 1.2 billion Indians across the country. Telecom operators such as VodafoneIdea have taken telecom connectivity to the remotest part of the country, to some locations where even power supply is not available 24 by 7, and democratized voice and data services which are being offered at the world's lowest tariffs. We have set up one of the largest telecom network infrastructure in the world with investments of over rupees 11 lakh crores, connecting Indians across 5 lakh villages. With Pan India 4G network, faster speed, and better availability of 4G, we are witnessing huge increase in traffic and data consumption. In fact, just a few years ago, India was one of the lowest ranked countries in broadband penetration. But today, we are the largest data consumer with 600 million broadband users. Talking about my own company, BIL, ever since we merged 2 years ago, and now completing the world's largest telecom integration, we have more than doubled the capacity of our data network and delivering more than 2 times faster speed on our latest BI GigaNet network. We have created a future fit digital network for the new India, and in our new avatar as we are committed to serving the needs of digital Indians and be a champion of digital India. The ongoing pandemic has necessitated the need to go digital. It has completely transformed the way in which we live, work, study, socialize, and engage. At BIL, we witnessed the impact of this changing digital behavior in the first week of the lockdown itself, when we recorded a year's worth of traffic growth in just 7 days. The pandemic has taught us different ways of living, which is much more dependent on digital infrastructure and connectivity. Thanks to the latest technology and deep rural connectivity, the educated youth in smaller towns may not even need to migrate to metros for employment opportunities. Government and private sector can also harness and talent the entrepreneurialism that exists in non-urban and rural India. The latest VI or V ads show how a farmer's daughter used IoT to remotely operate a scarecrow in the field, and how a senior professor takes online lessons from the safety of his home. This indeed is the new reality and the new normal. And more than ever before, telecom will continue to play the role of an enabler for growth of people, societies, businesses, and overall economy.
Thank you very much.
Ashok, PGV, I think we lost him. Ashok, can you just check?
Our Honorable Prime Minister has a vision of digital India, and the telecom industry is realizing his dream. Telecom connectivity forms a strong foundation to the government's flagship development programs. It is enabling financial inclusion, digital payments, and supporting the rollout of various governance programs in areas of agriculture, healthcare, rural banking, UPI, government subsidies, and distribution, plus many more. As we move into the next decade, the future connected India will be built on technologies such as M2M, IoT, AI, blockchain, and robotics. The progressive NDCP 2018 policy document highlights the needs to leverage these new emerging technologies to create robust digital infrastructure in the country. It also emphasizes on the need for financially strong telecom sector to enable an atmosphere of investment for other critical services like education, health, banking, and governance to become easily accessible to all Indians. Hence, a speedy implementation of the policy is the need of the hour for achieving India's goal of a $1 trillion digital economy by 2025. And now, as we move forward, 5G is the next destination. We are running our networks for 5G. BIL's own network is built on many principles of 5G architecture, with some of the largest deployment of 5G ready technologies such as massive MIMO, DSR, small cells, Open RAN, universal clouds, and many more. But before we see commercial 5G services, the ecosystem must develop, and we need to establish India-specific use cases. I am confident with government support, a light touch regulatory approach, and a vibrant private sector participation and investment, we will realize the digital India dream. And now, as I conclude my speech, I would like to thank our longtime friend, Pradeep Gupta, for getting us.
Oops, I think we again lost him right at
Yeah.
the end. So, thank you very much for those wonderful words. You are absolutely right that, there have been complete disruptions that have happened. And it's great that the telecom networks, as you said, that, there's a 50 times increase. What was the traffic in 365 days happened in 7 days. So, 50-fold increase, and the industry stood up firm and ensured that that would happen. TV, some of these things we could not even have visualized 25 years back. When the mobiles came, a lot of people thought that this was going to be a luxury thing. It was expensive. Connectivity was only restricted to urban areas. And it was more, a luxury kind of an item. And very few people could sort of visualize what a transformational impact on society it would have. Why don't you talk about those early days? I'm sure those nostalgic moments would be, people would love to hear about this.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. In fact, you're absolutely right. Your question sends waves of nostalgia down me, taking me back 26 years to 1994, when I entered the mobile communication sector, even before the licenses were issued. I was the CEO of Sterling Cellular, SR Cell Phone, one of the two operators in Delhi. And huge were the challenges in setting up those networks then. You talked about how networks evolved and how the socio-economic environs involved. It was really most exciting times. And you talk about the novelty of the phone today. In those days, people did not know what a mobile phone could do. They wouldn't believe that you could make STD call, ISD call. They didn't know you had to have towers to set up. So there were huge challenges in even setting up the network, in educating the customers, consumer awareness, etc. And when we launched, and actually people could talk on mobile phones while they were walking, they couldn't believe it. And the greatest thing in those days, when you go for, say, a dinner in a hotel or somewhere, whether it is Moria or any hotel, the biggest thing to show off was then to plant your Nokia or your Ericsson phone on the table to show that I have arrived. I've got a mobile phone connection, because that was a big, big thing in those days. It was considered a great elitist toy. Gone are those days now, and we have come a long way. It's a great thing to remember those days. Talking about the evolution of networks from that time, as you would appreciate, those were small networks compared to the giant networks of today. Those were small networks, but large were the challenges in setting it up, because people did not know mobile technology in India, except some experts from defense services. Defense services were a bit experienced in setting up mobile networks, and so all the mobile operators used to take experts from there. And that's how we all went forward. And when we set up the small networks, for us then the challenge was not spectrum. Today we talk about spectrum, and that's one of the biggest issues today. But then as new entrants, we were new entrants. And for us, because we are starting from a zero base, when somebody had a mobile phone, he had to talk to somebody. And obviously there are very few mobile connections in India. So he'd have to ring only a landline. So interconnection became the paramount criterion for success or going forward. So interconnection with the monopoly incumbent operator, which was the giant government operator, who had about 40 million landlines, that became the paramount necessity, and thereby hang the tail. I mean, today we talk of new entrants having faced problems in entry today also on interconnection. Then it was magnified 1,000-fold. So our big requirement was interconnection, and can you imagine it? In those days, the one of the things that was created by the monopoly operator was a 24 times, that is a 2,400% increase in mobile tariff. That is, if you wanted to call a landline from mobile, apart from paying the huge mobile tariff, which was 16 rupees a minute, you had to pay 24 times a landline call. And that was about 24 times into 1.2. So that was a big amount. Nobody would call a landline. And then the new networks would be stifled. So we had to rush for justice. What do we do? No regulator. The TRA bill was lapsing session after session in Parliament. And that was not a priority for the powers that be. So we rushed to a Delhi High Court. And I remember Chief Justice Jagannath Rao, I think was the name, and he heard this complex issue, which was argued for us by senior counsel like Harish Salve and Venugopal, KK Venugopal. And he said, oh, this seems to be a very complex techno-economic case for which the Telecom Regulatory Authority was supposed to be set up. Why is it not set up? Then the government counsel said, promised, in all fairness, he said, I'll go back to my client and talk and persuade and come back. Sure enough, he came back. The government counsel then was Mr. Abhishek Singhvi. He said, I persuaded them the authority would be set up. Lo and behold, the Telecom Regulatory Authority. Hello?
I'll just come to the government part. But you painted a fantastic picture, how expensive it was and so on. So just governance issue will be my second question to you. But I do remember that, because of the things that you talked about, we discovered missed calls, we discovered SMS, in a big way. We used to ring up on mobile phones and then do the call on fixed line. All those kind of unique ways so that we could do it in a very, very cost efficient manner. And I'll come back to you on this governance issue, which is going to be my next question. But Dr. Ranade, I have, you are an engineer, and then after that, you are also an economist. There is a very significant portion of the economy which is governed by communication, by telecommunication, by interconnectivity, and so on. How do you see this entire evolution? TV talked about $5 trillion or $3 trillion now, but if 20% of that is going to be technology driven, then we are talking about a tech driven market in the range of $500 billion to $1 trillion in terms of the economy. So what kind of socio-economic impact has been witnessed, and how has it helped in terms of the SDG goals?
Yeah, PG, first of all, congratulations to you and to all of us for celebrating this great milestone of 25 years of mobile telephony in India. And I know your group has been really doing wonderful stuff. You've always been in the forefront of taking this message far and wide to a big audience. So I'm happy to be associated with this celebration today. The telecom, I don't know, the right word is revolution, I guess, is unfolding. It's not, we are in the middle of it. So it's too difficult to understand the full import, the full impact of it on social and economic life, and I might say political life as well, fully, because it's evolving and changing in so many different ways that we can only grasp at and understand only some aspects. So the full import is not yet known. For example, I believe telecom is both the bedrock, the foundation, as well as the architecture of the digital economy. So telecom is what upon which rests everything from financial services to e-governance and entertainment, e-commerce, you name it. This is one sector where I'm happy to report that it's an infrastructure sector, but it's been almost totally driven by the private sector. The huge growth that we saw has been almost entirely due to private sector initiative and investment. That is not to, of course, deny, and it's not, of course, the government has played an enabling role through policy and regulation. But in terms of the risk and capital, it has been, and creativity, innovation, it's come from the private sector. That's, so therefore we have to take note of that. In terms of the socio-economic impact and the Indian context is, of course, it's kind of a historic and I dare say in the world an unprecedented performance. I mean, today you know that our data prices are the lowest in the world, and I think Ravinder also mentioned how data consumption India leads the world. From something like $2 or $3 or $5 a GB, we are down to the price is down by 20 times, I think. So it's barely 10 cents. And voice, I think, is almost costless. I used to imagine back in the mid 90s when we were just beginning, because having been trained as an economist, I used to say the marginal cost of providing one more phone call is close to zero. And we were told in our classical economics textbooks that the price of a competitive product or service has to be equal to its marginal cost. And I used to say, why is the phone call not free? And people used to look at me like I'm crazy. But I'm happy to say that in my own lifetime, very quickly, that reality has come in our lives. But that's not also to forget that the amount of investments that are required, as you said, technology is so dynamic, and especially I would say in telecom is so evolving, so fast evolving, that it is a sector which calls for technological investments all the time. So while it's one thing to say that pricing should be equal to marginal cost, but it's another thing to acknowledge that since it's private sector driven, you need a return on that capital. If not in 1 year, at least in a finite horizon of 10 years or something. So that's the economic challenge. As far as the impact on socio-economic, of course, it's one sector which has grown at 5 to 10% productivity growth. One estimate says that if you increase internet penetration by 15%, the per capita income can go up by 5%. So there's a direct study correlation between internet penetration and growth in people's incomes. But when you talk about SDG goals, there's Sustainable Development Goals as initiated by the United Nations, I can see that at least out of those 17 goals, at least 4 of them are directly affected or impacted, and telecom is relevant to that. Number 1 is poverty. I believe, as I said, per capita incomes go up, new avenues of livelihoods open up, there's more efficiency, so definitely it has an impact on poverty. Goal number 4, I think, is on equality education. We are seeing, as Ravinder also mentioned, that not just students but faculty, education is telecom is the conduit through which education is being delivered. And even before the pandemic, we had massively online education. We had Khan Academy. All that requires the bedrock of telecom. So education is goal number 4. Then we have 8 that is about industrial growth and employment. So clearly, with in the automation, IoT, industrialization 4.0, maybe later on we'll discuss that. And then I think inequality. That's also something, the kind of telecom access does impact it. If you have digital inclusion, I think it does have some impact on inequality, in the sense it can have a positive impact in reducing inequality in society, because it brings accessibility, and it brings these resources like high quality education. When massively online lectures are available, since PG you are from IIT, an IIT professor teaching to a class of 20 students or 50 students is different, and an IIT same excellent quality teacher being accessible to 20,000 students or 1 lakh students is a different thing. So again, telecom makes it possible. So I think it has an impact on inequality as well. So various aspects of
Absolutely.
SDG are affected.
Yeah, you're so right. When you highlight party, education, industry, and employment, during the pandemic also, the way we saw mobile phones becoming the lifeline for the migrant laborers and so on. I mean, absolute great stories that came out during this time. Gaurav, I have one question for you. We are talking about digital India, and obviously in digital India, the big comparison that comes is in terms of what we are doing vis-a-vis China. Uh, we still have a very large number of unconnected people. Okay, this is a huge infrastructural challenge that we have currently. What is your perspective on that? What would be some of the global best cases of trying to do this entire connectivity? Ajit also referred to the fact that there is heavy investment that is required in terms of the infrastructure, and there must be returns. When you look at that, what kind of business models can India follow?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you very much. So, I totally concur with you. As a country, I think there is a long way to go for us as far as building, a good quality digital infrastructure for all the, citizens of the country, basically. First of all, the pandemic taught us that the networks which we have today, they have stood well, even if the traffic grew, let's say, multifold. So that clearly showed that the network which we had were of good quality and were very robust. But I think as we move forward, and as we let's say, have more and more people and applications coming online, the reach of the network has to also grow very big, actually. And as you rightly mentioned, it's a very capex intensive model, actually. But I think it is also important to see how other countries have done it. So first of all, I think government plays a big role here in terms of building these network infrastructure, and very similar to how government builds roads and railways. Digital infrastructure should be seen in the same light, basically. And government doesn't look for returns in, let's say, in those areas, basically. So I think uh, having a let's say, expectation of return on the digital infrastructure, I think we should look at it in the same way as we look at other infrastructures where government invests. So I think that is the first point. And of course, there are models like NBN in Australia or BT Openreach in UK, where governments are investing in, let's say, in rural broadband, and making sure that good quality digital infrastructure is within the reach of the citizens. So I think that is one part. I think investment for the well-being of the citizens, for the progression of the citizens, as we look at other infrastructure, digital should be looked at in the same domain, basically. So this is one, let's say, area where government has to play a role, basically. Secondly, there is also private sector can play a role, basically, especially in areas where the economic case is not very strong. Let's say if you look at let's say rural areas and so forth, then there are some very clear models available about viability gap funding, which are which have been used in other countries. Our honorable Prime Minister also you know talked about it some time back in terms of connecting all the villages in the next 1,000 days with optical fiber. So the other class of let's say model which can be used is the viability gap funding model, where of course uh, investors come on board, basically, and they basically build a business case for let's say use of the for building and using the digital infrastructure. I think that is the second area which can be used as far as the models are concerned for building the infrastructure. One very interesting point which we have seen recently in Europe, basically, that a lot of capital is available in the world, and somehow it is the other way around, that capital is chasing opportunities. So a lot of fiber based assets are being funded by PE firms, insurance funds, infra funds. So that is also a good opportunity for a country like India and for the government to see if there is, let's say, capital available at very low cost and can be deployed for development of digital infrastructure in India. And this is, happening quite a lot in Europe these days. Even, even second, third fiber to home overbuild business cases are being funded because suddenly the pandemic has shown us that digital infra is basically like essential, like like water, electricity, and so forth. So different models are available. I think from our perspective, long way to go, a lot of investment required. I think government should play a part in terms of building the infrastructure like they build, roads, railways, and other infrastructure. And in case, there is further funding required, I think a lot of capital is available in global markets. And if there
Sure.
is a decent enough business case there, people will come and invest in it.
Sure. So yeah, Gaurav, what I hear you saying is that, this should be treated like a utility, which number of people
Yeah.
have said. You say that there should be, thriving PPP models, and you talk about, laying fiber in a big sort of a way. Now on that, and you referred to the Prime Minister's goal of, another 1,000 days, huge amount of fiber connectivity. I come back to you. We've been for the last 10 years, NOFN, we've been talking about what are the things that need to be done and so on. But that sense of urgency has not been there. So, is this 1,000-day target achievable? And how are we placed to achieve this milestone? And how can it help once again meet the digital divide?
So,
Ajit?
yeah, yeah. So definitely, it is possible.
Ajit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, PG. Actually, as of July, I think the target we have reached only 1.4 lakh. So you're right that there seems to be a little bit of, and of course, the pandemic has probably also affected the pace of progress. But if you're talking about fiberization in general, there are other right-of-way kind of hurdles, and I don't know if this is the right time to mention the big hurdle of investment. I think Gaurav also referred to it, that the industry is currently reeling under a debt of something like 8 or 9 lakh crores. Okay. And as I said, this is something that we are going to depend on the private sector to lead. Of course, the public sector or the government will enable, but if you're expecting the private sector to lead, whether it is the fiber optic connectivity all the way to the villages, or the 5G preparedness that we need to have for the next stage of industrialization and next phase of telecom, it will have to come from private sector investments. And I see that it's going to be a bit of a challenge because we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are also in a situation where the debt burden is huge, and we don't want to jeopardize because the debt burden means it's not only on the telecom players, but it's also connected to the banking, the stability and the health of the banking sector. So maybe that perhaps, yeah, PG.
Yeah, I was just saying, I see your point that, this has to be sort of addressed in a manner so that it becomes an engine for growth rather than starts sort of, becoming an impediment. So there has to be a PPP kind of model. There have to be proper sort of economic models that need to evolve.
Yeah, the government has announced, as you know, 110 trillion rupees. That is, 100 lakh crore infrastructure pipeline. It's a very well designed, well fleshed out plan, which also has telecom as an infrastructure there. And then that's got a mix of debt and equity, and that's got a mix of public and private funding. So if you look at that, there is you can see the blueprint. But I'm saying because we have been hit by this pandemic, and pandemic has affected the economy and growth rates, and also the fact that the banking sector has to now take some of that burden of the slowdown and the stress on loans and so on. We need to acknowledge the reality that the telecom sector also has a fairly significant burden of loans. And so we need to carry that along when we talk about the next phase of telecom growth, whether it's 5G, whether it's connectivity. We have about 500 million people connected to the internet. We need to take that to 800 million or 900 million. So all that ambition has to, I'm saying, take into account the current reality of the macroeconomics. But that will get there, I have no doubt about it. And in fact, the one silver lining in the pandemic has been the huge push to the digital economy. So in that sense, that is an accelerating factor, I think. The fact that people have got so easily, they've been able to make that transition to the digital aspects of life.
So I said, "Hum honge kamyab ek din." That is the kind of a thing which is there. Coming to you, TV, and now let me talk about the regulations that you are referring to. Networks are the lifeline of the society. Ajit has talked about the tremendous impact that it has had in terms of the economic growth of the country and the impact that it will have on the future. TV, you head the Broadband India Forum, so you've been having a lot of dialogues with the government on this entire issue. Do you think the new digital the communication policy addresses all these issues? What is the kind of governing structure that is required?
Very good question, PG. It's a tall task before us. See, first of all, I would like to say that I'm a great optimist, and while there are huge challenges, and although we have a long way to go, in fact, I would say in broadband, although we have made tremendous progress in the last 3-4 years, we are the highest data user, the cup is only half full still, because 600 million broadband connections represents only 50%, and that too connections, not subscribers, because unique subscribers will be less. So there is tremendous potential for growth here, for development here, and that's what I would like to hark upon. And your question about how the government is looking at it, we have the NDCP formulated in end of 2018, which was one of the most open and consultative policies made by government, the Department of Telecommunications. A brilliant document, remarkably done through a full dozen expert committees within DOT and with consultations of all chambers of commerce and associations. Everybody bought into it, all segments. There was no voice against it at all. We believe as an industry that it holds all the answers. We don't have to go elsewhere. So the sooner we start implementing the NDCP, I think the results will come knocking on the door. Talking of investors, you will have investors breaking open the door and coming when there is a 50% growth probability, 100% growth possibility in broadband. So we believe that the answer is NDCP for many of our evils and challenges. And the government has done a great job in that. Regulator has done a great job. This is the first policy since 1994, and I can vouch for that. This is the first policy that has the full inputs of the telecom regulator. Government and regulator together made it. It's a great document. So I think the answers lie there. And as regards the creation of digital infrastructure, in fact, the first chapter in NDCP says Connect India. The item there is creation of a robust digital infrastructure, what Ajit and Ravinder, Takkar, all of them referred to. And as rightly referred to by Ajit also, see, there is something called spillover effects of digital infrastructure. When you look for a return on investment, the government must facilitate that approach, which is there in Japan, where the ADBI had innovated that. The fact that when you build a digital highway connectivity, you can associate a lot of socio-economic development around that with that, and that can be quantified. It has been quantified. We in Broadband India Forum are currently doing that exercise. We are doing that exercise with ADBI, and you can find that you owe a lot of the benefits of the economic development to the digital connectivity provided. So you must give a part of that back to digital sector for as their return on investment through some concessions on the taxes and levies. I think this is a great theory which has been put forward by Dr. Yoshino of ADBI, and we are working closely with ADBI on that. It's a great thing, and as earlier referred to also by another speaker, the BIF career report surely showed that for every 10% increase in internet traffic, there is 3.3% increase in GDP growth rate. Fantastic growth. That's what we need. So I'm very hopeful. Let's build on NDCP. That's a great foundation on which the future can be built, whether it is for connectivity or security or growth.
Absolutely. That was a policy where, as you rightly said, that it was not just the regulator and the government, but the kind of consultative process that was adopted. I remember we did a few, roundtables and involved the industry and so on. So it was a very, very fine document. But I'm glad that you have led us to, talk about the future. And when we start talking about the future, obviously the critical thing is the 5G rollout. So Gaurav, can I get you in at this time and ask you what are the challenges in terms of rolling out the 5G networks?
Yeah, sure. So, the 5G network, I think from a user perspective, we first need to understand, like 2G, 3G, 4G have been mostly, let's say, communication, let's say voice and video kind of, networks which are used for these applications. 5G networks will also have a role to play in mission critical applications, whether let's say running an enterprise or in defense or in let's say running a power grid. So very very mission critical applications will run on 5G network. So hence the quality of service, the ultra low latency or latency let's say parameters are extremely important from an application perspective. So I think these are some of the changes in terms of the user aspects basically. As far as the architecture is concerned, 5G will be largely a small cell architecture. And as we all know, it operates on higher frequency bands. Hence, more sites will be required to let's say build like a continuous coverage of the 5G network. So, there are different types of studies available, but people are saying anywhere between 3 to 10x of the current sites would be required to build a good quality and a coverage basically 5G network. And of course, imagine if we say in India, there are around 500,000-600,000 tower sites today, and if we need two to three times of those to build a good quality 5G infrastructure, that's a mammoth task actually. So I think there are a lot of challenges in terms of site acquisition, getting the power, the fiber to every base station, and so the challenges are actually very huge in terms of building the like a 5G network or a 5G infrastructure. But at the same time, I think the way it will start is either as a private network for an enterprise where within a campus you build the network, so that would be much easier to build, or in extreme traffic hotspots, let's say in metros and so forth. There, of course, upgrading the existing sites to 5G, that would be that would be the way it will start. And of course, fiberization will be key. I think this is one of the challenge we we face as a country that around 25-30% of our sites are fiberized today. If you look at West, it's around 70-80%. But each 5G site would require like a good fiber connection. So these are some of the challenges, multiplication of the number of sites required, a good quality fiber, let's say, connection. Uh, and that's, just the whole mammoth task of building these sites, acquiring these sites. These are some of the big challenges which I think we face as far as building a good quality 5G network is concerned.
So thanks, Gaurav. And I think it is good that you brought out this point that, this entire 5G rollout would require lots of investments to be made. And when it comes to investment, let me move to my economist friend, Ajit. Any investment must have a benefit at the end of it. So what do you see is the benefit as far as the digital society is concerned, the fourth industrial revolution is concerned? And then, aside from the benefits that you see, what is the kind of a governance infrastructure? Are we ready for that? Is that infrastructure in place, or do we require a new governance infrastructure?
Yeah, so PG, let me answer the second part first. That just to add to what Gaurav said, I see at least three challenges. First of all, 5G is a cutting edge thing. So India is not far behind any other country. The whole world is at a stage where they're sort of grappling with this new frontier. But I can't say for sure that any country has a significant advantage.
Sorry to interrupt, Ajit, but there was a time you were thinking of taking global leadership in this area.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we are now one of the players who are very active, but we could have actually been leaders in that area. Yeah, sorry,
absolutely.
Back to you.
So yeah, so I'm glad. So just to dispel that this is a cutting edge thing and we want to take leadership. But I want to add to what Gaurav said. I see three challenges. One, I've already mentioned to you that the same players are supposed to take the lead. But let's acknowledge that there is a stress, there is a financial stress, and you need to make sure that it's a viable thing. So, I mean, for example, let's say if you're going to auction the 5G waves, which is in the 3300, 3500 megahertz range, and at the very least, if you look at the current base price of something like 500 crores per megahertz, for 100 megahertz, you would need at least 50,000 crores. So that's something that companies and players will have to rustle up. Second is what Gaurav said again, fiberization requires, we need to increase substantially the fiberization, not just in urban locations, rural locations across the country. And that has its own challenges in terms of right of way and all that. And third, again, by way of regulation, this is a new phenomena that we need to think about. For example, what's the regulation regarding cybersecurity? What's the regulation regarding privacy? I think the data privacy bill is currently in Parliament. So these are the new frontiers of regulation. I mean, as you know, somebody coined this phrase. I think data is the new oil, but the data, as they call it, data sovereignty, data ownership. I think the regulation will have to really think seriously about these kind of issues. So it's new territory, but it's important. Cybersecurity, data privacy, data sovereignty, monetization of data, and so on. But now coming to the impact of this, it's huge. I would say I mentioned in the beginning of my remarks that we haven't fully understood the full import of what telecom revolution has done to our lives. And even as we are trying to discuss that 5G is upon us, which, as Gaurav said, this is qualitatively different because it goes into areas like, for example, IoT, Internet of Things. There are countries, for example, the state of Andhra Pradesh has a vision that it'll be the hub of Internet of Things for the entire state. We are talking about what is called industrialization 4.0. We are talking about that includes things like robotics and artificial intelligence and machine man machine interface. We are also talking about skill requirements to use this technology. So when we talk about industrialization 4.0, we'll have to talk about university 2.0, because the kind of skills that will be needed to be able to harness the power and potential of industrialization 4.0 are completely different skills. So complete revamp of curriculum, the mode of delivery. So actually just investment potential in education alone, forget about telecom, just investing in this new sector called education, which I call University 2.0, itself is going to lead to a lot of returns. Remember, the country has an aspiration to reach industrial production or industry as a share of GDP from the current 17% to 25%. And that is going to ride a lot on this industrialization 4.0, which in turn again is related to the telecom evolution into 5G. So as far as returns on this is concerned, I think I have no doubt in my mind, because I told you, and I think Mr. TV also confirmed that the impact of internet penetration, the impact of broadband on productivity growth, on per capita income growth, on livelihoods is known. I don't think that's going away. We haven't reached anywhere close to, not even close to this saturation or plateauing of this. So the connection between investment in telecom and returns in terms of livelihoods or productivity growth are there to stay for some more time. So, the share of digital economy in India probably today is not even, I don't know, in terms of GDP, is probably 10%, 15, I don't know. That has to go up to, if not 50%, at least 40%. So you're almost quadruple. And the kind of returns on that are huge. So exciting times ahead. And challenges are in financing, proper regulation without stifling innovation, and at the same time making sure there's enough risk capital to fund this. So I'm going to actually take your leave, because I have another engagement, but thank you for inviting me, and it's really exciting to be part of this. As all of us, I think, with gray hairs, remember the days when just an old telephone instrument used to be a luxury, where one phone in the neighborhood, and we are already discussing 5G in our own lifetimes.
No, I know, and thank you very much, Ajit. I know you have to get into another webinar at 4 o'clock, so we will excuse you. But thanks a lot. I think you really brought out the economic impact, and not just in terms of Smart India, but also in terms of Smart Bharat. So I think, and as you said, that whatever investment we make in 5G is something that will have far-reaching benefits and much better impact on some of the critical things which are required for this country. So thanks a lot. But I will continue with my
families. Sure.
Thank you very much. Continue with my other guests. TV, we talked about in terms of the 5G, the fiberization. We talked about the investment and so on. It was a very critical thing, and Ajit did talk about it in a little way, was the spectrum. And Gaurav also referred to the spectrum. What kind of models should there be? I know there is a lot of deliberation that is going on. What kind of things we should look at as far as the affordable spectrum for 5G is concerned?
Very good question, Pradeep ji. In fact, spectrum is at the base requirement for 5G, because it's a mobile thing, and spectrum is at the base of that. Without spectrum, you can't have 5G. Of course, you need fiber also, the other things, but spectrum is very, very essential. And here, there is a lot of work to do. And once again, I get back to NDCP, because NDCP has seen that, and you'd be surprised that they have clearly referred to the need for optimal pricing of spectrum, and thereby hangs a tail, because our spectrum is probably needing to be tweaked a bit, the spectrum valuation methods, to get to optimal pricing. The 5G prices which are there as recommendations before government from the regulator are about at least 4 to 6 times the international levels. And that is something which could well make 5G a poor show here, because if it is so costly, how will it go to other verticals? Because 5G is the first G that is going to go outside the telecom. It is going to go to Medicare, healthcare, it's going to go into education, into manufacturing, into research and development, logistics. So, with that sort of spread, you need affordability everywhere. A simple example in Germany, for example, where they have given huge spectrum, there are, for example, 90 licenses, I believe, given to public and private sector parties for private networks. I think somebody else referred to, Gaurav referred to private network. There's a huge opportunity for private networks in 5G. Apart from the general macro networks, private network for factories, for hospital, you could have a 5G network in Ames. You could have a 5G network in Honda factory, like that. And there are special licenses for that. Germany has shown the way, other European countries are doing it. So we need to first look at spectrum, not only from the point of view of valuation of the spectrum, where the pricing is very high. And here I would clarify that we are all for auction. We are not saying one word against auction, but auction also depends on the reserve price. If the reserve price is unrealistically high, then the outcome is not good. We need to get to reasonable reserve price and let the market deserve the true reserve, discover the true value. Second aspect, apart from pricing, is the fact the quantum of spectrum. Everywhere you'll hear that in India, the spectrum which is available, which is going to be considered for 5G, is probably very, very low. Less than half. I would not even say half of what the international norms are. You will not be able to realize the benefits of 5G unless you give more spectrum. So these two, if you address, I think we can have a very powerful G. And like you said, very rightly to somebody else, I think to Ajit, you said that we should be leaders. And with the right pricing of spectrum and the right quantity, I am very confident that India, with its IT savvy, IT prone population, we can show the way to the rest of the world, as we did in mobile. In mobile also, we came last, but we have shown that we can come to the top. Like that, we can do it in 5G also.
That's really wonderful, showing the way. And Gaurav, your views on this would be very interesting, especially because if you look at tomorrow's network are going to be software driven, right? Software defined and so on. And we have an edge. India has an edge in terms of software. I mean, in hardware, others were ahead of us, but in software, we are the global leaders. And if that is the kind of a case which is there, then can it be a made in India network, and can it be something which is actually, we could be taking those technology globally? Would love to hear your views on that. The challenge that TV has thrown, that why should it be only an India thing, but why can't we take it to the globe?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I totally agree with that view. And just responding to what TV sir mentioned, I think in Germany you can walk into a post office as an enterprise customer and apply for a spectrum basically, and you can get it for a few €100. So I think that is one example. How easy is it to get an enterprise spectrum or for a private 5G network? Okay, coming back to this, the new networks or the networks of tomorrow, will be software defined, and software is where India has the global edge basically. So I totally agree with that, and you will see, made in India networks basically. So starting, so a typical 5G network would have semiconductor, hardware, software, and then system integration. And of course, if you look at the key components, so software, India is a global, leader. We all know. System integration also, very strong companies exist, which are coming from the IT system integration side, and they are moving into the telecom system integration domain. And semiconductor, there is a lot of talent available in India who are designing semiconductors for all the global companies in India. So if you look at the entire value chain, so semiconductor, hardware, software, system integration, 3 out of 4 areas of the new network, basically, India has a very strong edge. And hence, we are very, very confident that new types of players will emerge from India who will provide, not only the hardware component, but also the software and the system integration component. And in my view, for the first time, you will also see a lot of effort going into the semiconductor or chip development, because a lot of value resides in that part of the value chain. So semiconductor, software, system integration, these are the three big things in the networks of tomorrow. And many new players from India will emerge, and you will see, and I dare to say that, but dominance of Indian players in the networks of tomorrow. I think that journey has already started, and I think it's only a matter of time that you will see, billion-dollar companies, multi-billion-dollar companies emerging out of India who are building the networks of tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for that. By the way, we've been getting a steady stream of questions that have been coming from the attendees. And quite a few of those questions I have already integrated in my subsequent questions as we were carrying on this discussion. There were questions about security, about the data, about the challenges, and I kept on interspersing those questions in my various points that I was raising to the speakers. There is one question, and I'll start with you, Gaurav, first. Government has been talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and therefore, what do you think should be our future agenda?
I think the future agenda should be full control of the 5G value chain. So right from semiconductor to software to system integration, I think there should be programs dedicated to foster each of these ecosystems. And we all are aware of multiple policy initiatives, whether it is capital subsidy, whether it is R&D benefits, uh, duty structure, taxation. There are multiple policy tools available. But I think what is very important is, for all of us to recognize there is, there are a couple of ways where we can win this race, basically. So, there is the semiconductor race, there is a software race, and there is a system integration race. Fostering ecosystems in each one of these areas and helping to create, to seed and create companies in these areas through incentives. And the models are very well understood. The way to create it, I think I don't need to dwell on that. But a very focused program-based approach on these three areas is something we as a ecosystem, as government, as policymakers, as people who have been in the industry for long enough, we should push that agenda so that we can look back after 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and we could say that, okay, uh, you know, top 2, 3 companies in the 5G and beyond generation 6G, let's say networks. The chips are, designed and manufactured in India. The software is completely Indian, basically. The entire stack is a make in India stack. I think with all the tailwinds which we are having based on virtualization and software defined, so there are a lot of technology tailwinds. We have the capabilities, some concerted efforts in terms of good policy initiatives to provide incentives across the three ecosystems of chips, software, and system integration. I think we would be very well placed in terms of creating a full make in India stack and then exporting it to the world.
Great, absolutely wonderful. We need the full India stack, and what I hear you also saying is that therefore perhaps we should be investing in a fab and so on. Come
Yeah.
to my last question to you, TV. You you started by reminiscing about the last 25 years. What do you see happening in the next 10 years that you will talk about when we have a similar conference in 2030?
You're asking me to look into the crystal ball. Yeah, that's a great thing to do. Well, I think the future is bright. Like the visions of Gaurav, I'm fully with Gaurav in his vision of what we should try to do. India can get into every aspect of this value chain. We have the skills in us. Maybe a little honing is required, but the skills are basically there. The aptitude is there, the innovativeness is there. What I see in the startups, and we have a number of startups in Broadband India Forum, is fantastic potential. So the what we can do, I think the sky is the limit. We have to develop on that. But first, to make all that happen, I think the government must first do something to improve the economic health of the industry. Everybody is talking about telecom is the backbone of digital infrastructure, of 5G, everything, IT. For that to be healthy, it must attract investment. And for that, a few things have to be done, like spectrum reforms by duties and levies reduction. Not look to telecom as a money spinner, but as something which generates its own uh, wide spectrum of benefits, economic benefits for the development of the country. So when that is done, I think we will be leaders, though a little late in 5G, like we came in 2G. And going forward, some countries have already started developing 6G. I think if you look at the next 10-year frame, I'm envisioning that India starts working on 6G right now on the research and standards so that we are able to influence the global standards on that and so that we are in readiness for manufacturing well in time for 6G, which is expected to materialize in the world around the early 2030s. I think we have got time. I envisage that India will be in the front running position there in 6G and do pretty well in 5G also by that time, by digitalization, moving into Industry 4.0 with all the skills and aptitudes that we have. The only small basic requirement is we must improve the economic health of the sector. Then only the real flood of benefits will start flowing. That's my humble view.
Wonderful. I think that was very well put. Just to sort of sum up, I mean, it's been a very, very rich discussion, gentlemen. We talked about the disruptions that have been caused. We have talked about the path on technology that, an irreversible path that we have undertaken. We talked about the $5 trillion economy and how critical telecom is to that entire piece and could be enabling 20 to 40% of that particular economy. But for doing that, the economic health of the entire sector is something which is paramount. The government needs to look at the entire thing as a utility. There have to be very practical PPP models that have to evolve. We need intense fiberization in the country. And if we end up taking up the ownership of this entire value chain, then it is not just India that will be affected, it is not just Bharat that will be affected, but we can actually make an impact on the entire. With that, thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very, very engrossing discussion and for bringing out absolutely rich points in this entire thing. And over to you, Shubhen, for your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. Thank you, Suvendu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
TV.
PG. Thank you, PG. A very big thank you to all the speakers, Mr. Ravinder Takkar, Mr. Ajit Ranade, Mr. TV Ramachandran, Mr. Gaurav Basra. It was very encouraging to hear the reiterations and the statements about India's potential as the provider of new age network, provided we put our acts together. We all look forward to the vision coming true. And on behalf of CyberMedia and Voice and Data, I also thank all the participants who joined us today, who shared their questions that we could take up. Summing up, I am happy to inform you all that today's webinar will be available as video on demand on the YouTube channel and the Facebook channel of Voice and Data for you to watch it again and share. We'll also now call it a day for today. But before that, may I request you all to share your feedback through the form that will be soon visible on the screen. And signing off for now for the third part of the series till we meet. Stay home, stay safe, and keep reading Voice and Data. Jai Hind.